Well, the GOP won several big Senate races last night. Indiana, North Dakota, Missouri, Florida. Come on in, Alberto Gonzales, former U.S. Attorney General. Mr. Attorney General, welcome back to the program. Great to see you, sir.
Good morning.
I've issued an editorial, kind of a rant, which says that the Republicans in the Senate will now be able to reshape the judiciary along their lines for another generation. Am I right?
Absolutely. Obviously, losing the House is a loss, but as between the two houses in Congress, if I'm the President of the United States, I'd prefer to maintain control of the Senate because of the power of confirmation. And obviously, the main objective there is to get more of your judges nominated and confirmed. And you're right, because they serve a lifetime, it is an opportunity to shape the judiciary for a generation and more.
If there were another Supreme Court justice to be replaced in the next 2 years under Mr. Trump, there would be no problem with getting Mr. Trump's pick going through. No problem at all?
Well, it depends, of course, sure, on the nominee, the qualifications and background issues related to the nominee. We also don't know, things may happen domestically or internationally that may shape public opinion for or against the president. So a lot remains to be seen. But obviously, if you look simply at the numbers, the number of Republicans in the Senate, the job of the president has gotten a little bit easier.
Do you approve of reshaping the judiciary along more conservative lines for a generation?
I think, every president campaigns. This is one issue that they campaign on. They lay out their vision for the judiciary, and if the American people accept it and elect that president, I think the president has an obligation to try to do that. And obviously, we're not talking about putting judges on the bench who do not respect the Constitution, do not respect the words of the statutes passed by Congress. But I think it's important to nominate judges who understand that they have a limited but very important role in our constitutional structure.
I'm going to put a presidential tweet up on the screen. It came in this morning, and here it is. It's about investigations. If the Democrats think they're going to waste taxpayer money investigating us at the House level, then we will likewise be forced to consider investigating them for all of the leaks of classified information and much else at the Senate level. Two can play that game. Can you summarize for us how President Trump could limit the damage to him and his administration from these investigations that we're expecting from the House?
Well, at the end of the day, the House is going to do what it's going to do, and if the executive branch is engaged in any kind of wrongdoing or wasteful spending and things of that nature, there should be oversight. That is a constitutional responsibility of the Congress. However, I think it goes too far when they simply do an investigation because they want to harass the executive branch, they want to embarrass the President of the United States. And what the President can do, obviously he's very effective at the bullet pulpit, so he can talk about this. He can distract by issuing executive orders and forcing the Congress to focus on the executive orders or even to work on legislation. And finally, of course, he can assert executive privilege. It's a power recognized by the Supreme Court of the United States. So there are some things the President can do, but at the end of the day, the Congress is going to do what the Congress is going to do.
We hear that various committees in the House want to subpoena the President's tax returns. They want to look at Trump hotel receipts on the grounds that maybe Saudis have been staying in the Trump hotels, therefore contributing revenue to Mr. Trump. We hear that they're going to subpoena his cell phone records. I mean, is that going too far? I mean, you can't impeach somebody for all of this, can you?
Well, there's a difference between a subpoena for this information and going beyond that and trying an impeachment of the president. As to whether or not obviously Congress, if they do have the votes to issue this kind of subpoena, whether or not that effort will be successful will depend upon the judgment of the Attorney General, who will look at the requested information, make a judgment as to whether or not the president is justified in asserting privilege, in which case the president will assert privilege. And at that point, it really goes to the courts. If Congress wants to enforce a subpoena over the executive privilege, it's an issue that will go to the courts, and what the courts will do will depend upon the information requested.
Guaranteed it will be a nasty political atmosphere.
No question about it.
Mr. Attorney General, thank you so much for being with us today. Important day. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, sir.